Hello class, this is Professor Qson again, and what we're going to be doing with this video is talking about what a literacy sponsor is. By this point, you should have read Deborah Brandt's feelings on what a literacy sponsor is. She's kind of the one that came up with this theoretical concept of what it means to be a literacy sponsor. Okay, so as we start going through this, okay, we're going to be talking about a number of different potential sponsors that could exist in your life and that you are going to write about in your literacy narrative. Sponsorship is something that affects us from the day that we're born, and it will go until the day that we die. In the beginning, so when we are first born, the way that we learn about reading, writing is generally from family members. And I think one of the things that's worth noting is that the way that we think of family has changed so much in the last half century as we have so many more single-parent homes. We have youngsters staying with grandparents and different family members. So you could potentially have learned your reading and writing skills from other people. Your parents, your grandparents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins. These are generally our first sponsors when we are 1, 2, 3 years old and we're just starting to learn how to read. So some of the questions that you want to think about with these sponsors: did they read to you when you were young? Did somebody read to you when you were young? Because this can have a profound influence on your feelings about literacy, and it's really important for you to think about these attributes, because I know that for me, it made a huge difference in my want and desire to read and write, were influenced by the fact that my parents and my grandmother read to me when I was a kid. So that's something that you have to think about as well. How do they encourage you? Was there a lot of positive reinforcement? Was there some negative reinforcement? Okay. And again, the key thing is with sponsorship is it can be positive, but unfortunately, it can also be negative too. So that's just something that you have to keep in mind, is there is this idea that sponsors are positive, and that's true in some cases, but in some cases it's not always true. And unfortunately, I know that this is a reality for a lot of people, but the lack of family involvement, there is a lack of family involvement for some people, and that could be for any number of reasons. You have parents who are working jobs. If you have a single parent, maybe they're working a job. Maybe there's nobody around. Okay? So that's something that you want to think about with your family. And, I do think you want to try to pick out somebody in your family to write about who had that heavy influence on you. Teachers also play an important role. This may be your second point of contact with literacy after you've engaged with family members about literacy. When you start preschool or kindergarten, the first person that you're generally going to see that will teach you about literacy is that kindergarten teacher, and that's hugely important for your development as you go along in your academic journey, which starts when you are 4 or 5 years old. So think about your primary school teachers. Who are the ones who really helped you become more literate? I have found that with a lot of these literacy narratives, and this isn't true for everyone, but for many students, there is that teacher very early on that had somebody who positively influenced them and really sticks out in their mind as having helped them read and write. Okay, generally this is a primary school teacher, somebody kindergarten, first grade, second grade. There's generally one person. And then, on the other hand, there's also somebody who transitions from loving reading and writing to not enjoying it as much. Okay, because I found that, again, many students, not always the case, but for many students, there is a transition period that occurs in either middle school or high school where they stop enjoying reading and writing. And some of that has to do with standardized testing. Some of that has to do with the teachers themselves and their personalities. Some of it has to do with the books that they're reading. But you want to think about how you evolved, what your perceptions are of English and reading now, and who are the people who make you really enjoy it, and who are the people who maybe make you not enjoy it if that is how you feel about it. I don't think that there's necessarily a right or wrong answer for any of this. This is about your experience. Okay? What's most important is don't try to cover every teacher. Focus on the most important ones. Okay? Focus on those 2 or 3 people that perhaps have had the most influence on you. So there are some other human sponsors to think about as well. Priests, friends, coworkers, bosses. I don't really have anything specific to say about them, but these are also clearly some people that you can talk about in your experience. Okay? Priests can help you read. They can help you understand the Bible. I know that so many of you have had the experience of going to a religious service on a weekly basis. So this is something you might want to talk about. When I say priests, this includes any religious leader, regardless of what your religion is. There are figures in that religion that can help you become more literate. Maybe you've had friends who have served as sponsors, coworkers, even bosses. And again, it comes down to the idea that they can be either positive or negative. So I want to take a short break from discussing sponsors because there's some questions in your literacy narrative that I want you to think about. And in a way it does apply to sponsorship, but this more specifically focuses on the kinds of questions that you are answering with a narrative. You are answering who, what, where, when, why, and how. Those are generally referred to as the 5 W's and an H. Okay, the final 2 questions are most important because they really cause you to think about your literacy journey. You need to explain and use details. Okay, I know I've mentioned this before, but your ability to be grammatically perfect, yes, that is important. Yes, you want to have as good a vocabulary as possible, but you want to explain and use details about your specific experience. Okay? The better, your narrative is going to be so much better if you are specific and precise when discussing your experiences. Avoid cliches in your writing. Say what you mean. Okay? And if that's not quite clear, then that's something we can talk about. But it's so important that in your narratives, you are as specific as possible. Better detail you give, the better. It just makes my experience of reading your literacy narrative so much better. So we talk about people as sponsors. Institutions can also serve as sponsors. Okay, think about the schools, the quality of your schools. Did they enhance your ability to become literate? Did they hinder you in some ways? Think about the teachers. Think about the teachers and the way they taught. Think about the standardized tests. How did standardized tests affect your education and whether you liked English or not? Okay, and this bottom bullet point is something that I like to point out to students because I don't think they quite understand how school funding works. Okay, and why is your school better than other schools? Why are schools in Collierville better than the schools in Fraser? There's specific reasons for that. It's because schools get funded by property taxes. That means that if you live in a neighborhood with high-cost homes, schools are going to get more funding. If you live in a poor area, then schools won't be well funded. Think about what that means. Think about schools, because they rely on property taxes. What does it mean then if the property taxes are low, or if they're not being collected as much because of the fact that the homes are in not as great a shape? It's going to have an effect on the quality of your schools. And that's why you end up with such problems in the educational system, and there are the haves and the have-nots when it comes to school. Another way that I think this gets represented is the ACT test. Okay? Now, some of you may not have had to take it because of COVID-19. Some of you probably did. But regardless, I want you to think about the ramifications of this test. Think about the importance of this test toward your college career. Okay, you need to get a certain score to get into certain schools. And if you don't get those scores, then you will end up not having as many options for your academic career. Okay, if you get a 35 or 36, you can go to a lot more schools, get scholarships, whereas if you get an 18 or 19, then you're more restricted to where you go, and you may have to take perhaps developmental English classes or developmental math classes. Okay, so for many students, my experience has been that they do not have to pay for the test, at least the first time around. But somebody is paying $50 to $60 per person to take the test. Okay, then think about if you take it a second or third time, you're paying again $50 to $60. Do the math, multiply those numbers. It is a lot of people. It's a lot of students. And where is this money going? So what I want you to do is to do a Google search of the ACT test. Spend a few minutes looking around to see who puts out the test. Then find the value of whomever puts out the ACT test. Okay, this is where the extra credit comes in. Text me the company who puts out the ACT and the value of that company. How much is that company worth? I'm going to give you a hint. It is a very, very high number. We are talking a lot of money. We're talking in the millions of dollars, maybe even billions. I'll let you tell me. Okay? Now, when it comes to this test and this extra credit, do not ask about this extra credit during our class session. This extra credit is only for those students who watch the video. So if you are watching this video, you know about the ACT extra credit. If you do not watch these videos, they don't know. So this is a way for me to know which students are watching the videos and which ones are not. And for those who are not, they're going to miss out. Okay? So by completing this extra credit, and again, you are texting me to the phone number, you are not emailing this to me. Part of getting the extra credit is following directions, so make sure that you text me, not email me. But students will get 10 points added to their second journal entry if successful. So you successfully complete the extra credit, and you get the points added to your second journal entry, which of course is about Literacy Sponsor. So there's an article that I also want you to check out that I'm going to show to you. So I want you to read this article about the ACT test. Okay, I'm not sure if you're able to necessarily get through the URL here, but you can kind of see what this looks like. I just want you to take a quick look at this. This is not required reading, but I think this is short enough to where you can kind of get an idea of the problems with the ACT test. So definitely check this out, and you might want to even Google search the ACT biased, inaccurate, and misused. Because make no mistake about it, as an institution, this is a literacy sponsor. The ACT is a literacy sponsor. What does this test having such an influence mean for students? How does this literacy sponsor create opportunities and present limitations? There are also some other institutional sponsors, including prisons, community centers, hospitals, rehab facilities, jobs, and offices that you could talk about in your writing. Okay, that is it for this video this week. Thank you very much for watching. Good luck with the extra credit, and I hope to see that many of you are messaging me over the course of the next week or so that you can get those extra points. Again, thank you so much. Have a good week, and I will talk to you again for the next video when I talk about some of my pet peeves in writing.